Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious today with special guest Tracy Gill beside me there. Hi Tracy.
Hi.
And Mikey Haddad.
Good to be back,
And of
Mark.
course Mikey Haddad does payloads with Mikey once a month and brings on all kinds of awesome people that'll tell you about the science done in our amazing space shuttles over a 30-year period. Here we're inside. What's the green screen we're looking at inside here, Mikey?
That's basically the Neurolab, inside of the Neurolab module. What you're seeing actually is how it was outfitted before it went to the Smithsonian up in D.C. So this isn't the flight insides of Neurolab. You'll see that in a few minutes, but this is actually how it was shipped to Smithsonian. When we get to this one in the sequence, there's a story behind what you're looking at right here. We'll tell that
Well, Marty picks out our green screen, so he probably picked out a good story for us to tell.
Yep.
And we're going to hear about the Neurolab, which I understand is the last configuration of the Spacelab gone to space in 1998. And though the program continued for another 13 years, kind of hard to believe you didn't fly another one, right?
That was the last module mission, yeah.
Because all the rest of them were hard hat construction missions. Is that right, Tracy?
Space station construction, yeah. A little less interesting because most of the time the space station elements were off on the way up, and Spacelab was much more active in the orbiter period.
Ah, yeah. Well, that kind of dawned on me, a little prep for today's show, that that was kind of probably, well, we'll see how you all felt about that. But we'll talk a little bit about Tracy, find out where he grew up and how he got involved in this space business after we talk about those noisy rockets again out just 9 miles away from us there. And there is the, Marty, would you like to make that bigger?
Yeah, we'll try.
Hope
we don't crash.
And
Okay.
there we go. That is a shot that I took from the Hyatt Place 5th floor launch viewing room that they built specifically for this, the Hyatt Place beside Boeing
Okay.
in the 405 there. Those construction cranes or the finishing touches are going on the last causeway over the Indian River. You'd have thought it had been the first causeway they would have built, as important as Kennedy Space Center is to our nation and so forth. That puzzles the heck out of me. But finally, they're getting rid of the last drawbridge, and it's the entrance into the Space Center there. SpaceX launching some communication satellites there and off Pad 40. Didn't take it long to hit the cloud deck, but a lot of people got to enjoy maybe their first and only space launch. You never know. And for Marty, he's seen thousands of them, just like you, Mikey and Tracy. But wanted to share that with you today. And as we go to your book, The Payloads and the People, and it's available on Amazon. It's a Springer book. You can go to spacelabpeople.com, and you encourage, that's the website for people who worked on this to still communicate with you, Mikey?
Yeah, what we did is we set up this website because the book was just a fraction of what actually occurred during the whole Spacelab program. And so we created this website for two reasons. One is for people who work Spacelab, to basically dump their brain on this site. Tell everything you did, aspect all the problems you'd solved and those kind of things. And the second thing is the people that want to learn about Spacelab can get and read about those stories that those people tell. And so the book was just a start. Again, there's only so much you can put in a book. This is kind of the place we want where we can get. It'll be long term. It'll be a place where people can go for years and years and hear stories and read about all those things that happened during the Spacelab program that you really never heard about. Yeah.
Well, believe me, these stories are going to be retold at our Shuttle Fest, as we just concluded Shuttle Fest 2, and in my opinion, like STS to prove that Columbia could go to space and come back. So our humble little museum proved that we could put on a pretty A-list event, and it was received real well. And glad that we had some problems because, Marty, we can refine things easier when things don't go well. And sometimes, you need those hiccups in the first few beta tests, or if they happen further down the line, they can really get you.
Just ask Elon.
Yeah, just ask Elon Musk, Marty says about that. That's right. So before we get wound up with the Spacelab payloads here, I want to learn a little bit about Tracy Gill here. Where'd you grow up, Tracy, and how did you get into this rocket world?
So I'm a Florida native, and think when I was about 4 years old, I was living with my parents in Gainesville when my dad was going to school at UF, and I remember seeing one of the Apollo landings on TV. It must have been Apollo 17, and from then on, I was kind of enamored with the space program and getting to grow up in Florida and seeing space shuttle launches, and then getting enamored with Star Trek and Star Wars. I just wanted to be a part of putting things into space, not necessarily being an astronaut, just being part of this community that puts things into space where everybody can go into space on a regular business. I remember the Jetsons. You could go to the spaceport and get on the next taxi to Saturn. That's I wanted to be a part of that.
Anyone in your family part of the Apollo legacy? Or
No, my dad's an accountant, and my mom was a librarian, a teacher, swimming instructor, all kinds of things. But my dad said, "Whatever you do, don't become an accountant." I said, "I got you, got you on that." So
I tell kids today, whatever you do, don't become a liberal arts major. Go into engineering like me and journalism and stuff. We were all going to be Woodward and Bernstein in the 70s and uncover Watergate scandals and stuff. And my dad looked at me and says, "You're a good writer, you're a great photographer, but you ain't making no damn money. You know, you're a salesman. Get out there and make some money." So same way with you kids. Get into engineering. Find something that something like that. But we need liberal arts people, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very happy doing what I did. So anybody else in your family get involved? You just how did it end up that? Where'd you go to college? How'd you get picked?
Unsurprisingly, I went to University of Florida.
Okay. Go Gators, huh?
Go Gators, and a couple times.
I'm a
now.
Buckeye from Ohio, but we don't meet very often.
No, not very often.
Sports, anyway.
No, and I just, like I said, I have a copy of my high school papers that I wanted to work for NASA, so I really wanted to do it. When I was in college, this is what I wanted to do. I applied here. I came on a tour. I actually toured with a Level 4 group. Got a great visit with, I think, Jim Suderman and Scott Vongen and some of our coworkers that you've probably met here.
Yes, Scott Vongen on last week with
Louis Delgado.
Louis Delgado, yep.
And
Great guys.
I was fortunate enough to get hired, and I think I told Mikey in the book that my roommates knew I really wanted to work for NASA, and I came home from school one day and I had a message that somebody named Fred Head from NASA called and wanted to interview me, and I thought, there's no way anybody named Fred Head from NASA called. Fred Head, you just made that up.
Fred Head.
Yeah, and I didn't call him back. And then a couple days later, sure enough, Fred Head from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, called me and offered me a job, and that's how I ended up getting here. But I thought my roommates were trying to pull a fast one on me and just say, "Oh, Fred Head from NASA called."
In the old days when the old horn phone in your head there to pay phone.
No caller ID, no voice.
Right.
No.
You're in college, and you just, I didn't have enough quarters for the machine until Dad sent me the check for my allowance. What we have here to tease you with is some space-flown artifact that Tracy's going to tell us about. But before I turn it over to them, I want to read something. The introduction to this Spacelab book of Mikey's here says this. As I get my glasses here, the preface of this says, "Every time I saw a Spacelab mission lift off, I got a very special feeling inside that lasted about 2 weeks. The performance of the experiments in the Spacelab was an unqualified success on every mission, and it would be hard to be more proud of the work that we did. The fact that we got to work with a bunch of great people from KSC, other NASA centers, and from around the world, as well as working as a new complement of experiments every few months, made it a fun, exciting, and interesting job that could easily be called a passion rather than work." Unquote from you, Tracy Gill. In the front of that book, Mikey, you chose that probably from your friend there.
I thought that summed it up very well. And I asked Tracy, can I put that in the front of the book? And he agreed. So that says it all. That was an awesome statement, Tracy.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you so much.
And I picked up your book that just found out at me, and I saw it before. I'm going, wait, this is the guy that's on the front of the book there. So honored to know you, Tracy, just like I am Mikey's other friends in there. He even brought John David Bartow in here, and that was pretty cool. Almost a year ago we did that, Mikey.
Yeah.
Well, we want to hear about the Neurolab mission on STS-90. Of course, you all know that we celebrate the shuttles of the month. All right. Would you believe that there were 16 shuttle missions in the month of April? Okay. And the STS-90 was in the middle of the month on the 17th. Yesterday it was launched in 1998 on that last mission. Some cool astronauts on it: Linehan, Searhouse, Scooter Altman, and Kay Heyer, who I've met before. Hope to get Kay involved in there. And so they're going to tell us all about that mission. There's the astronauts on there. Bucky, I'm not sure I know who Bucky is, Marty. It's like if you had taken that name Bucky and put it on a list and said, eliminate who's an astronaut. I've never met the man Bucky, all right?
I think Jay Bucky ran for Congress in the last, I think he's from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I don't think he made it.
Did he win?
No, he didn't.
A lot of astronauts have a hard time winning, quite
He-
frankly, in there.
Oh, he was a great guy.
Tracy and Mikey, the floor is yours. You just tell me when the next slide is. As any comment about the Neurolab there?
Okay, we'll go
Patch
to
there.
the next one. This is basically a banner, right, that you guys had up. Now, did this actually fly?
That one didn't fly. That one's a little too big, but there is one that's flown that's mounted in the space station processing facility.
And you guys were able to sign that.
We
right?
all signed that one, yeah.
So this is kind of like basically it's the display, kind of all the organizations involved with Neurolab. It was a banner we had up in the operations and checkout building, kind of where we worked, kind of a goodbye to Spacelab. So let me go to the next one.
Tracy's wearing that shirt
Yeah.
with the Neuro. We can't get by Decade of the Brain. Now, this ain't Pinky the Brain, okay?
No, not Pinky the Brain.
No, okay, the cartoon
Yep.
guy, okay.
And as I mentioned, I think we did most of the work on Neurolab in 1997, and when I saw it was Decade of the Brain, I thought I missed the first seven years of Decade of the Brain.
This is just picture of the crew, the people that you just mentioned. So of course, want to give a shout out to the crew, a big crew.
Big crew, Kay Heyer with all those men there. She's a Navy captain.
Yeah.
I gotten to know her pretty good. And
Kay's the one who awarded me my Silver Snoopy one, dude. That was
Oh, really?
quite an honor, yes.
Oh, great.
Okay, this is a shot again in the operations and checkout building, which is now the Neil Armstrong spacecraft operations and checkout building, and you're looking from west to east down the basically the high bay of the building. And what you're seeing here is the integrated Neurolab racks. This is basically the last time we put together all these racks for a Spacelab mission. We wanted to show this kind of like as a send off to say this is the last time we did this operation. Was Neurolab. And you can see all the hardware behind it that's still kind of being worked on.
And how many times had you done it before, Mikey?
Oh gosh, how many module missions flew?
About a dozen.
I think about a dozen different
yeah.
module missions.
And while I'm thinking about it, since this was the last one, where did you level 4 engineers segue into? What did you do the last decade of the shuttle era with construction of ISS?
Space station.
Space
yeah.
station.
Space
Okay.
station assembly and utilization.
Okay.
Just every time a new element would come through, we would run tests, but get the elements to work together on the ground before we launched them, and then all the utilization. So when the space station went up, it had a lot of laboratory spaces that were launched empty, and we outfitted them with racks, and we tested those racks on the ground, and then they were launched. So a lot of our skills translated really well because we were used to building and assembling and testing, and we were using those same skills and experiences with the next program. But again, all of our stuff happened kind of pre-launch. As I mentioned, when these pieces got into the shuttle, the station pieces, they were mostly off until they got to the station and then turned on. So for us, the ground processing was a little more interesting in the shuttle era because we had all these interfaces to the shuttle to test, as well as making sure the experiments work.
And things were like for this mission where there was animals, it was basically powered up all through launch. And Tracy explained, well, how do we interact all the way to T0 to make sure all this stuff's ready and powered up and monitoring it. So we'll talk about that in a little bit.
There's so much more than meets the eye when it comes to these complicated payloads going up there.
Okay, what this is the shell of the module, and you're looking kind of towards the aft, and what you'll see those kind of angle pieces, those are the racks. So this is kind of a picture of
the gray areas.
The gray areas
racks, yeah.
are the racks. That's the experiment racks now going into the pressurized module. It's just
How
kind of
deep
a cool
are
shot.
they? A foot, 2 feet back behind there, the racks? Or the racks?
They're a standard 19-inch rack, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
that's right.
And so the next picture, you go to the next picture, This is kind of the outside looking in. This is as the racks are getting sent into the pressurized module. Again, this is the last time they did that. And one thing interesting, you look at that, the inside of those grates, you'll see kind of like a U-shape, couple U-shaped structures in between the racks. That's called a braces kit.
They
for
look
the
like
racks.
a metal detector.
Well, basically what that does supports the racks, because the racks themselves cannot support their own weight. They always have to be supported during ground processing. So that basically shows those racks going into the module for the last time. Yep.
Which always fascinates me, that the hardware is made for zero gravity, so you make it as light as it can to be the tensile strength, so to
Yes.
speak, would break on Earth, but,
1G, yep.
but not up in space. So you save weight that way.
Save
right?
weight that way, and that's why these racks were. If you were to take the support structures out, they'd collapse on themselves, basically. Yep. Okay. All right. This is, and I'll turn this over to Tracy. This is where we get into basically the module's outfitted.
Yeah, this is a scene during one of the tests. This looks like one of the mission sequence tests where we had a mixture of astronauts and some of our technicians in there. And what you can see kind of in the middle there at the bottom is it looks like a bag.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lower body negative pressure device. And what they were testing on this mission is you put the crew in there and have them kind of soak in the lower body negative pressure device, which helped pull the vacuum on you. So they were testing the effectiveness of having a vacuum on your lower body to kind of pull your fluids back down like you would have in 1G.
Well, this is 1998, and I know they did that on Skylab in 1974.
Right. So they did do that, and I think what they found during this this series of tests was it was effective, but it's very awkward to be tied to this bag. And they found that the effects of having that on you wore off after a few hours. So it probably wasn't that effective of a mitigation strategy for your health in microgravity, but it was something worth trying, and this enabled us to get some really good data on it, where several crew members got in it over several days, and they collected a nice set of tests.
Again, this is all done in the operations and checkout
There's
building. All
another
the pre-flight
picture of that.
tests. Yeah.
They're talking about the silver-looking cylinder there.
Right, another thing that was interesting about it is because all this testing was about medical science and biology, and every time that we had a crew member doing one of these tests, we had a flight doctor on call. So I'd have to call the flight doctor and say, hey, we're getting ready to do this test, come down, and in case there's some issue, they always had to be nearby because we had crew medical subjects during these tests.
Were you guys your own medical subjects?
No, the crew did it.
Or only the crew did it?
Crew or qualified crew surrogates.
Okay.
But then you'd have to have a flight doctor there.
Not Mikey.
Not Mikey.
No. you weren't going to get in that, huh? Okay. We love the
This is basically a picture in the crew in their bunny suits. Again, I guess early in the program they used to be on their blue suits, and then we realized that provided some contamination we really didn't like, so they basically had to become like the rest of us and get in bunny suits when we got inside there. Yeah.
well, High K and High Scooter. I know they're in Colorado Springs at the big
National
space
Space
symposium
Symposium?
going on
Okay.
up there. And there, as are some of our board members there. Big day out there.
This is who's the guy on the left?
Yeah, that's me on the left there. That looks like we were in there doing, I think this is during closeouts, actually in the orbiter. And in most pictures of me at work, I seem to be not doing anything. But there was really a time that I did work. But I think we were just standing around talking about something, waiting for the next milestone in the the procedure.
Marty, I think they're playing rock, paper, scissors there.
it could be.
It looks like it,
could
doesn't
be.
it?
We were having fun. I know that much, and we had a lot of fun back then.
And you can see again they got the latex gloves on, even the crew, when they go to touch something, even though in orbit they're going to touch it. On the ground, we protected it.
So this is the rodent animal handling facility, or RAF.
Okay.
So
Rodent handling facility.
Rodent animal handling facility.
RAF. Okay.
RAF.
All right.
So we had two fixtures like this where we launched rodents for science, and that drove all the things I think you talked a little bit about for the module vertical access kit, where you lower technicians in there. They were installed a day or two before launch. And then we had both rodents and fish on this mission, so that made it interesting. And and as Mikey said, we had to get these things ready starting about a year before launch. We carried them all the way up through launch, and then with this one, we loaded right at the last minute to get it ready. We monitored to make sure refrigerator freezers were working properly, that the rodents were healthy. The way we knew if the rodents were healthy, they'd be consuming their food pellets, and we'd see the meter kind of move on where the position of the food pellets were, and we could see that they were drinking water. So we kind of had that insight to let everybody know, hey, we're good to go for launch.
Now, one of the things, too, Tracy talked about was a mission sequence test.
Yeah, the mission sequence test. So thanks for bringing that up, Mikey. So I brought this, I was waiting for Mikey to give me this call. So I had this file of paperwork, 25 years old, that I've been holding on to, just waiting for Mikey to call. And this was the input that the mission management team gave me. It's the kind of the mission sequence test plan. And what it is they identified 3 different slices of the mission, and we would run a test over a week, usually like a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and say we've selected 4 hours of the mission timeline because we want to exercise maximum power events or maximum data flow, or running 2 particular facilities in parallel to see if there's any interferences. And what I would do is I would take these crew procedures along with all the procedures all of our team had written. So we had procedures for powering up the space lab, for powering up every experiment, for doing all the pre-op setups and the post-op breakdowns. Put all those together and then take the crew procedures and translate them into KSC procedures, and then marry that into one big giant 500-page procedure to run these tests. And we did the tests usually on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we had off days on Tuesday and Thursday where we recovered from any problems, did any setup for the next day.
So basically, the idea was to drive out the problems, find out if it's going to break. We're going to break it on the ground to fix those problems, so the crew didn't get that on orbit. We wanted to make sure that they was 100% ready, and the crew was going to function for them. Yeah.
And that was always your philosophy at the level 4, to break it on the ground before space, right?
Lot cheaper and more efficient to fix it on the ground than to spend crew time troubleshooting on orbit.
Yeah.
All right. Go make that big, Marty. There you go.
That looks like the vestibular fish embryology unit, I think. VFU. I don't
Whatever
remember
the acronym was, yeah.
The acronym soup is getting tougher on me as I get older. But that's the fish flew in there, so they were studying how the fish would react in microgravity. So
that I would like to see.
I'll
I'll have to look at some videos about that.
There's not a lot of video of that because I think they were wary of, as a matter of fact, this is one thing I wanted to mention is it was the first time in my career and the only time where we got a speech about, we had training because we were anticipating protests from animal activists, which was fine. We were aware of PETA and other things, and they just wanted us to be sensitive and to be prepared on how to answer questions. And it even carried over into how they asked us to do our testing. So like they asked us not to say, mice or rat or rodent when possible when you were doing testing, just because they didn't want audio to be pulled and people to hear about that, because we were trying to be sensitive about that. But one day when we were testing, and we were aware of these needs, but we were testing and we were doing a video test, and I think it was in a general purpose workstation, and they turned on the camera, and one of our people, I don't know if it was one of our technicians or one of our principal investigators, put a stuffed animal. It was a rodent stuffed animal, which was very funny. It wasn't Mickey Mouse, but it was a rodent stuffed animal, and we all got a good laugh at that. Though I did say, well, we're not really supposed to be doing that, so please get that out of the view. But it made for a fun day.
A couple other stories too, don't you?
Yeah. There was another day it was funny that it happened during Neurolab, because as far as I know, it had never happened again. But we were testing one of the facilities. I don't remember which one it was, and suddenly they said, "Hey, our cooling is turned off. What happened?" And we didn't know. So we went to the fluid loop pump, and it was off, and the switches were on, and so we started troubleshooting. And I asked one of the technicians, "Hey, go over to a utility outlet," which I should, this is one of our, and this flew on Neurolab. This is an experiment power switching panel, and it was just one of the facilities at the bottom of the rack to turn on the payloads that flew, and it was wired in, and there's connectors on the back if you flip it around, and so each of those switches is wired to the feed of the Spacelab and then up into the experiments. And we had a panel similar to this one for the AC utility outlet.
But this actually flew.
But that actually
this flew on Neurolab.
It's still got the stickers for Neurolab right on it. It's a which switch for echocardiograph assembly, a spectrometer, and a crystallization facility. So several different. I think this was from Rack 9.
That's neat.
So I asked the technician, hey, go measure the AC utility outlet and see if it's on. And we found out that the AC utility outlet was off. So all the AC power was off. So we said, okay, let's power down everything until we figured out what's going on. So it's just safe all the experiment hardware because we didn't want anything to happen to it. So then we started looking around, and one of our technicians went up to the floor and said, I think the power supply is off. And it's like, well, that's weird. Why would anybody have turned it off? Well, we had this big, huge 400 hertz AC power supply, and it was famous for being kind of loud, and it rattled, and the fans inside to cool it. Well, one of our newer technicians went over there, and he saw this thing. This is what we found out later. He heard this loud rattling noise, and he kind of opened the door to see what's going on in there, and it had a kill switch on it so that when you open the door, it turned off. So he opened the door and it stopped rattling. He says, oh, good, I fixed the problem. And he walked away. And that's when, the cascading series of what happened, it powered down. We found out that the technician thought he was doing a good thing, wasn't familiar with the hardware, opened the door, turned it off. And, it cost us a few hours. It was kind of an amusing story, but now it is. But if that day it was a little bit frustrating. And, he bless his heart, he was trying to do the right thing and didn't know what the impact was.
Crosses my mind why there's so many barriers of credentials. If you don't have the right badges, the badging station is very important in your guys' lives. I know that you don't get to that. Beyond that. In other words, he might not ever be allowed in that area again there because he's not supposed to be there. He didn't know what was going on.
Well, that's true.
I always like that safety that you guys usually have.
Each of the buildings' operational areas had numbers, and you had to take and pass certification just to get in the room. So just to get in the ONC high bay required certification just to get in there. And then whenever you got anywhere near flight hardware, that's another certification. So you're right. There's all those barriers set up to make sure the right people are there working directly on the flight hardware. Yep.
And I was saying this, the SSPF, but that come along in the 2000s, the ONC operations and checkouts where you worked first, right?
And then we shifted over to the
over
SSPF. Yep.
All right, we're enjoying a great conversation here with Vince Gill and Mikey Haddad about the Payload Neurolab there. Vince Gill. I said Vince Gill. I said Vince Gill, Tracy Gill. I knew I was going to say that. Spent 35 years around where Vince Gill played and stuff in Appalachia there. He actually built a golf course in Bristol, Tennessee area there, yeah. No kin to Vince?
No, not that I know of.
Not that you know. Yeah, look into that.
I would cash in if I knew.
Absolutely. Well, Tracy, I really like what you're bringing to us today. Let's continue on with some more about the Neurolab, flown in 1998, the last time that a space lab or HAB went to space. Actually, correct that. 2003, 2001, of course, we had the Space HAB on Columbia.
Right.
What's the next picture here we're going to look at?
That's basically that's basically the inside again, looking towards the opening, which would be the tunnel that we go in. Now this is a rotating chair, and I think this one another great acronym. I think is VVIS, Visual and Vestibular Investigation System, but it's a rotating chair, and a crew would sit in it, and there was a horrible camera view of a camera mounted right in front of their eyes. So they'd be on this rotating chair, and they would basically play video, like a video game. And it was seeing how the rotation in different directions would affect your vestibular system. And it was sometimes difficult to watch as they were spinning and their eyes were kind of twitching. But they did a series of tests on that, and crew would get in it during those mission sequence tests, and that one could be run in 1G. And I mentioned earlier the mission sequence test, and we did the test on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And I think of the week of the Neurolab mission sequence test in level 4, we had a team social at Frankie's Wings and Things, which was a great place back. Still around, by the way.
Great place back in the day. Frankie's Wings and Things in the mall.
Yeah, this
Titusville mall.
Yeah, this was the one at the port, and we had a great social, good turnout, and we're having a good time. And then I noticed the crew, at least one particular crew member had a frozen drink, and they had a second frozen drink, and then I'm thinking, let me look at my notes here. Who's getting in the rotating chair first thing tomorrow morning? I think it's that guy. I'm like, oh. Then he had the third frozen drink. I'm like, I'm going to go home now because I don't want to know what happens here. And to be honest, I went down the next morning and I told the technicians, I said, just keep an eye out and be prepared in case, the astronauts get ill when they're on there. Because actually the rotating chair had a kill switch on it if they started to feel ill. But these guys are pros and there was no issue. But they did make me a little bit nervous because I'm like, he's getting in that chair the first thing the next morning, and they spun really, really fast. So that he gave me a little bit of concern, but there was no concern in the end. But I did.
Yeah,
I did
you make that picture larger for me, Marty. I don't want to do that on my panel here.
Yeah.
So the vomit bags on which side of there?
Yeah. No, I said, just be ready. You can have some towels and be ready just in case.
Absolutely there. So.
Yeah, that's just a picture of the floor and one of the bottom of the racks, and those were Velcro loops there so the crew could strap their feet in and hang in place if they were going to work on that rack. And those were the kind of the pads we used on the ground. For most of the time we'd walk into the module, we were walking on those pads so we didn't wear down on the flight surface there.
Now, any experienced astronauts on this that were in another lab that would say to the rookie, hey, blah, blah, blah with the Velcro, make sure your toes are in it or something like that? No.
Gosh, I don't know if they knew.
No, not really, but I will give you an aha there. You see just above that, the straps there is one of these experiment power switching panels. The one thing we didn't mention is this one has and that one probably pictures. It has this plexiglass shield on it. That's not for accident. So these switches all have guards on them. But we found that, because the crew is pushing a lot off with their feet and hands, we still had an occasional accidental power off. And so they added this extra layer of protection with this plexiglass cover.
And it has a string on it. Still the space
tethered in place.
Ah.
So if they wanted to turn things on or off, they had to pull the cover off.
And we actually have our our shuttle consoles for the fueling station that are real. Actually have covers on them that I thought were museum type covers. No, same thing. They have a design number from the engineering architect or drafting department.
Usually everything like that there's a good reason for it.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, so next picture. This is basically a picture of once all the testing and all that was done. This is the module, all integrated, configured, going into the payload canister. Again, this hardware never saw the light of day. So it would go in this canister, those doors would close, we'd go to the next building, which is the orbiter processing facility. And then in there, again, once it was inside the building and everything was conditioned, the doors would open up. And I think the next picture...
Would you make that a little bigger, Marty? I'm not doing that on my
Yeah, this is basically on the east side of the operations and checkout building, and the large gray doors, those would open up, and this whole thing would roll out down towards the orbiter processing facility, down near the launch pads or the vehicle assembly building. And then this is basically the opposite. This is, we pulled it out of the canister and used this large white structure we call the strong back to actually put the module into the orbiter. And here you can see the platforms. The reason I want to show this one is you see the platforms that they're standing on gives you access all around to when they would do this installation. There's a picture follow-on of this with those platforms removed to get there, and that's the next picture. Those platforms are now gone. Okay, you see, all you see is they're standing on the platforms. This next picture
over
the doors. Okay,
so the radiators actually
yeah.
that you're standing over there.
And so this next picture is a great picture showing those platforms removed. They're getting ready to close the doors for the last time on a Spacelab Module mission. One thing I want to point out too, some of the other payloads, you see those 4 kind of cans on the side. Yeah. One's a hitchhiker.
The garbage cans.
Yeah, they're actually, the first one there on the left with the blue is actually a hitchhiker, which is a kind of an advanced gas getaway special payload that flew. And then the other 3 were getaway specials that flew on this mission. So there was other things that flew inside here besides the module. Those are kind of the other payloads. I just wanted to point those out from this photograph.
Thanks, Mikey. That's a beautiful picture. Marty, we have any comments from our watchers today? I know they're enjoying today's program.
Nope, nothing.
Well, when they don't know much about anything, they don't correct us on anything. Okay, and we love it when you do correct me, particularly, because. But great shot there.
And then now we'll have some on-orbit pictures. I don't know if you want to talk about
some on-orbit pictures. So Raj, oh, that one there, the blue thing sticking out there, that's the general purpose workstation. So when they were studying there, the rodents would be in there.
Uh-huh. Neurolab. I mean, we're talking about the brain, but kind of, can you put in a nutshell, Tracy, what the experiment's goal was?
Well, they were really trying to just learn more of crew medical science for preparing for the International Space Station mission. So it was, what are the right risk mitigation steps we can do? What are the different effects on your body? Because remember, these were our long missions back then. These were 2-week missions. That was a long time for the shuttle era. And then as soon as we got to station, we started capitalizing on all this research. So, and the station crews are regularly go 6 months to a year now. And these 2-week missions were just just kind of getting that initial sampling on, hey, what does the science look like as they start to have these longer duration missions.
And again, the guys and girl up there.
Yeah.
Just a lot of stuff happening during these missions. You only have so many days, so they try to cram as much as they can into these missions and see. Everybody's doing something.
Yeah. Again,
So, like one day you might be the guinea pig, and the next day you're.
That's usually the way they did it too. There usually be a couple crew members working on one facility, and one day or one session, one person would be the subject, and the other person would be the operator. So they took turns torturing themselves on these missions. And again, that's a crew member in the chair, and the chair could be oriented in different positions. It could be lifted off and put on there sideways, and so the crew member could be spun in a different direction. I think he's wearing the helmet there, where they were kind of playing this video game to characterize their performance, their vestibular system performance, while they're being spun in a different direction. And again, if the crew started to feel ill when they were doing the test on the ground or in space, they had a kill switch to be able to stop it.
That was a major part of this, though, the chair and being put through those rigors of vestibular, the things in your inner ear and so forth, which,
Right.
and you see on the back wall there is the
flag.
The flag and everything that we saw earlier.
Yeah,
Speaking
of, on the back there, on the right there, there's 2 blue facilities there. Those are the refrigerator freezers, and they were also activated during launch. And usually when they went up for launch, you didn't really have anything in them, but sometimes we would stick popsicles or something in there that the crew would have for the ride up. But on the way back, they were needed for the samples that were being brought home. Sometimes that was urine samples or other unglorious things like that. But I used to joke about I had achieved my stellar performance at NASA when I was doing pre-launch monitoring, so to make sure the rodents were healthy and we had good facilities to bring back urine samples from space. So
But that's a good point you bring up too, Tracy. Post-flight, then you got to take all those samples and you take care of those samples and make sure they're not destroyed. So the work didn't end at launch. When it landed, basically we had to pick up again and do all this post-flight work.
some things immediately at the strip, and then others when it went in the OPF, right?
Yeah, you'd land and you'd go in and you'd get the urine samples. You'd pull the rodents off, and you'd do that on the runway.
This is just another picture.
The astronauts, Linehan, it looks like. There, our flight checkout list there. Keep your feet warm there with some socks.
Yeah, and that's why we had those switch guards. You see where his foot is right by the switch there.
Yeah, that kind of looks like this device here that
it.
you got in there. Great.
It might even be this one.
Why you cover those
It's the
up.
same one, yeah.
There's the
there's the lower body negative pressure device. Of course, you can tell that one's in space because it's sticking up in the middle of the module instead of being laying on the ground.
And there's no up or down in space.
No.
Yeah. Great crew photo there, yeah.
Yeah. How much did you interact with that crew? Just
A lot for the mission sequence test. So they came down. We did a mission sequence test in level 4, and then one in level 3-2, and then they came down to do inspections of the stowage hardware. So we had quite a bit of interaction. Had much more interaction with the crew in Spacelab than with Space Station, because they were, we helped them facilitate those tests that they could only do at KSC.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of a great program here. There's the Spacelab in space there. We know that Mark Usiak's enjoying it, as is his brother Tom in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We've got E.M. Ishmael's watching, Joel Dan, Doug Forrest is watching from Los Angeles on his lunch break, Steve Hammer, Dave Stangy's up in Michigan,
Wow.
Carlton Bailey is he's over in Cocoa, Connie McDaniel's one of our volunteers here, Robert Law is enjoying this up in Dundee, Scotland with his afternoon cocktail in his hand, evening cocktail. Cynthia Rossi is a great fan of our museum and this show. Christopher Mick, hey to you, he's in Hudson, Wisconsin, and he's a STEAM educator up there, so I know that he's enjoying what you have to say with our special guest today, Tracy Gill. Daniel DeYoung is a Spirit airline pilot, flies around the country,
Wow.
and he was at our Shuttle Fest. I hope you enjoyed that, Dan. And Gary Folsom is one of friends of Marty and mine here, and the Code Blue Collective has been watching us for a while, and
Thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate that.
and Chalazan, hey, thanks for chiming in there. So as we wind this up there's some of your team members there, it looks
Oh
like.
yeah, I don't know if we wanted to kind of talk about. We'll talk about this and then maybe talk about some of the things that Tracy did, because this is the end of the Spacelab program, and so Tracy had a lot of involvement with how do you bring a program kind of to the end.
Right.
What this is actually a picture of the module, Neurolab module. They got a team of us. The module is going to be sent to the Smithsonian. Well, when we went in and looked, most of the equipment the racks were empty. There wasn't a lot of equipment that was in the racks. And a team of us there, you see picture.
Which one's you guys? there?
I'm the one in the red.
Yeah,
I'm
you're in the red there. I thought.
But
that
Tracy,
was you.
unfortunately, he was gone. He couldn't participate in this madness.
They
But
wouldn't let you wear a hat in the ball cap.
well, kind of what happened was, it was interesting. We saw that the thing was empty, and we said we cannot send this module to the Smithsonian with a lot of empty spaces in there. So this team of us spent the weekend before it got shipped out, basically grabbing anything we could think of and just installing it in panels, switches, these guys, anything to fill voids that would fit. And of course, we'd put this together over the decades, so we kind of knew what would fit where, and screws and all that. And so basically what you see here is kind of an outfitted Neurolab module with just a hodgepodge of a bunch of different equipment, from different missions, some flights, some GSC. And again, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't bare when it went to the Smithsonian. Another story behind that, once it, and in fact, at the next picture, this is actually looking back towards the tunnel. Okay, now this is what we do is the last picture, as you're backing out, we call closeout. We'll take a final closeout photo. This is the last time somebody's basically going to enter this until the crew enters it on orbit. Of course, this one's for the Smithsonian. This is kind of what it looked like just before it got shipped out to the Smithsonian. And you see there was all kind of stuff in there, right? Well, it gets to the Smithsonian, and the curator up there was big time Spacelab program. She knew of the Spacelab program. And for years we didn't realize this until we talked to her later. For the longest time, she couldn't figure out which mission this was. She would look and say, well, that's part of this mission. Well, this thing in this
So
rack is
she
part of a
did.
different mission. She goes, something's not right here. And so finally she talked to Scott. She goes, Scott, what's going on with this module?
Scott Vongen.
He says, well, believe it or not, it's not the Neurolab mission. She goes, no, I knew it wasn't Neurolab and she goes, but it's not a mission. And he said, yeah, it's a hodgepodge of hardware from a bunch of different missions. And she says, for years I was trying to figure out which mission you guys recreated
Wow.
for us, and it was basically just a lot of hardware, just to make it look good. And eventually we thought, at the time, we'd set it up to where we could maybe power some of these racks up, some of the CRTs or the switches or the lights. And what would happen was possibly they would walk through and we put plexiglass walls up so people couldn't touch the switches and stuff, but they can come up close to all the flight hardware. And that never did happen. But that was kind of our theory behind it, was to put stuff that looked really cool in here in case people were to walk through it and see it in the museum. And so we tried to find the coolest stuff we could find and populate it with. And so that's kind of what it went before it went to the museum. And then, of course, Tracy, this last picture, was involved with, okay, hey, this is the end of the Spacelab program. How do you close down a whole program? It's very difficult.
Yeah, that was tough because we all kind of were hoping it would keep going, and we transitioned kind of that kind of experiment activity to Space Hab at the time. But we'd heard there might be a Neurolab 2, so we were kind of staying prepared in case they changed their mind, but they didn't, and it was disappointing. It was a tough time to be involved in that and shut things down. And being someone who had worked Spacelab at that point my whole career, then you get it retired. It gives you a midlife crisis kind of early. And I went off to work.
So what color was the Corvette that you bought?
No, I went off to work space station then, so I was okay, but it was disappointing to lose this capability, because Spacelab was great. We were trying to help the commercial business get started, and that was really kind of our first foray into that. So we were supportive of it, but unfortunately it was smaller and less capable. Mm-hmm. So it was difficult to see us get rid of this larger, more capable asset in favor of a smaller, less capable asset. But it was. We were trying to help get commercial space industry started, which is doing pretty well now from what I hear as we saw the launch today.
Yeah, absolutely. So many, Mikey, as you brought these great presentations to stay curious, one thread I see is that each of these programs had more missions planned, like the Astro telescope missions. Mm-hmm. They were hoping to do 3 and 4, and then talking to some people.
Eventually, there was actually 6 that was planned earlier.
Yeah.
They were supposed to fly Astro 6 times.
So was it just that the funding was taken away to build the space station, basically, right?
Yeah, we took our funding and wanted to get started on station as soon as possible. So they were trying to get those other Spacelab missions off the manifest to try to focus on getting space station assembled.
So basically, a space station or space lab was winding down. Those of us who worked on level 4 would then transfer to help ramp up space station. So it was tough, because you're kind of closing one down, but it's kind of exciting, and you're starting a new one. But it was sad to see Spacelab end. It really was. Yeah, it was a great,
so where can
place.
you see Space Hab at the Smithsonian? It's in the main Air and Space Museum, not at the Udvar Hazy.
The Spacelab Module, I'm not sure where it is, because they're going through renovations right now.
Okay.
Spacelab Module's at Udvar Hazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is it Udvar Hazy?
Okay. Same area as
where Discovery is.
Yeah.
Well, I've had pictures of it then. Marty took us on a trip there 2 years ago, and I'll have to look. There's so much there that, I was actually fascinated with the Corona spy satellites that they had there.
Okay.
That really mesmerized me, but I digress there. What a great conversation we've had with Tracy Gill. Hope that you come back and enjoy our museum. Tracy, you just got a glimpse of it here. But what do you think about what we're doing here?
Oh, it's great. I'm glad to see you thriving and having a lot of visitors and
we're full of visitors today. We had Barry Smith, who worked on the Hubble telescope, doing some tours here today. Most tours you'll be guided by a former space worker, and then or an amateur astronomer. We have on board here a couple too. So
yeah, it's a great place you got here, Mark. You guys do good work.
But we appreciate that, and it's made greater by you all participating and getting the word out about what we're trying to do. And it's just simple. We're preserving the birth of America's space age and all this science here in its delivery room, Brevard County. And we're so glad that you all were part of us today to do that. Here's Mikey's book. Marty, put that up there. There we go. We're fighting each other. There we go. There's the book there that I'm going to read cover to cover, as I've picked through it a few times as we had talks. But and David Shaler, who we had on in England, was your co-author on that. And we'll get our Google Meets up and going again, and get David Shaler back on there.
Okay.
Either of you have something you'd like to say that we hadn't talked about there?
There was one thing I was going to mention. I talked about those Leslie fridge freezers, the rodents, and so we monitored those things pre-launch. And the person that was in charge of all of our LPS software so that we could monitor these things before launch was Charlie Blackwell Thompson.
Was
and
she?
She's an important person these days. Our great great launch director.
She certainly is. She's got one launch under her belt, but she was hand-tapped by our friend Mike Leinbach, who you all know real well.
Yeah.
And let's fascinating.
She was our ground software person for all the monitoring the experiments and Spacelab program for quite a few missions.
I'll make a note of that, because we hope that she has her back there. Gary Gerald. He hopped off his tractor in Collins, Georgia, and Robert Katz is watching today. Thank you, Robert. I was saying, Gary, that's no joke. He's a peanut farmer up there in Georgia, and he loves space, and he and his wife have visited the museum several times, and he's a private pilot, too, to kind of quality people that we enjoy watching our program here. Marty, what you got on our UCAC family microphone there?
We already have, not already, we have Cliff Watson and Betty Feldman Valentino watching.
All right, good. Well, they learned a lot about a program that was had a brief history, but a powerful history. What do you think, Mikey? The how this Neurolab affected what's going on our continuously occupied International Space Station for the last 22 years?
Well, like Tracy said, the experiments that they ran in here were things that they would prep to be able to do. First of all, how the astronauts react, and then of course the long-term effects. So basically, the Neurolab was kind of like a precursor to help prep the crew for station ops. And so yeah, it was a like I say, it was a amazing mission that flew with a lot of different hardware, a lot of different science that was accomplished on it. And of course, you see what's going on with station today. So, but this is kind of the early stuff that we had to do to get ready for station.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in my part of my career, we had 3 missions that I worked on that were from Johnson Space Center, managed by them. The SLS-1, Spacelab Life Sciences 1, and Spacelab Life Sciences 2, and then Neurolab. And so those missions were really usually oriented for crew, medical science, biology, that sort of thing. And then the other missions that were managed by our friends at Marshall Space Flight Center were usually microgravity science missions. So it's physics and science and some other things like that. So it was kind of interesting to see the different flavor and missions from sponsored by the different centers.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, it's been a pleasure to get to know you. Don't make yourself a stranger here on Stay Curious. What do you like to do to have fun in your retirement now?
Well, I'm not retired yet.
Oh, you're not?
I'm working. No,
Yeah,
no, I'm a guy.
Okay.
Came from where I'm working on human landing systems now for NASA. So I'm working primarily with SpaceX, and they're developing our lander for Artemis 3 and Artemis 4.
Well, we'll have to have you back for that. Developing our lander for Artemis. Yeah, we know. We keep telling people they don't realize how big that Starship is that they're going to try to launch tomorrow.
We're trying to get it launched
You
tomorrow.
flying out there to watch it?
I'm going to watch from here.
Okay, all right. Well, we look forward to having you back,
bet,
right?
you
Right. Just like all of Mikey's
Good to
friends.
be here again, Mark.
You're a friend here of ours, okay?
Thank you.
And thank you. Cliff Watson is watching in Pomona, Australia. And how's your Thursday morning going there, buddy, on your brekkie? He's a personal friend of mine and gave us 200 stars, which translates into a few dollars for our Facebook coffers there. So we appreciate you, Cliff, and everybody that watched our program today. Marty, we have anything to clean up on our Streamlabs broadcast?
Nope, we're all caught up.
Well, good job. We appreciate that. Appreciate you guys being here. Mike, you'll be here for the Shuttles of May and come up with another fabulous program, I'm sure. And tomorrow we're going to celebrate Apollo 16 landing on the moon. After all, it is 420, folks, okay, tomorrow. So, we're going to enjoy that and talk about the great John Young landing on the moon with Charlie Duke, a man that Marty knows very well from his Grumman reunions, Mr. Duke. And we're hoping to have Doug McKinnon on, who wrote a book on the Apollo astronauts, kind of a question and answer, very unique book. And Doug, I need to get a hold of you if you're watching today. And thought I'd see him at Shuttle Fest, but we had a lot of things going on and he didn't make it. So until tomorrow, when we're going to talk about the next to last landing on the moon in 1972, Apollo 16, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.